Welcome back and hello to everyone who's new here. Like Julia said, we kind of envisaged this as a workshop series, but also like an organic conversation. So everyone on this panel has decided that we're going to chat between ourselves, but we're very open to sort of feedback as we go along. And if anything's not clear, please put your hand up as well so we can explain. You'll see as we start to explain a little bit about ourselves, what we've done here is designed as broad a spectrum as we can to do with the gallery context. And it ties in very nicely from last week's workshop. Luke is going to start off, and we're just going to tell you a little bit of background about who we are, just to kind of contextualize our opinions and thoughts. And they are just our own personal experiences, folks. So obviously, we're speaking about the industry, but we are speaking about our perspectives. There are many more. Okay, go ahead, Luca.
Cool. Hello, my name is Luca. And like most art people, I work many roles. I am a practicing artist part-time. I lecture in curatorial practice at the CTCA, and I am a co-director of Under Projects, which is what I'm kind of speaking about tonight. And Under Projects is a project space in Cape Town. We run on a patron system, and we basically just trying things out. We opened in September, and we done a sort of run of experimental shows, run by myself and 3 collaborators.
Cool. Apologies to anyone that listened to this last time. I'll just give you a brief overview. Studied a BA and an MA in Fine Art in London at Slade School, and then got offered a role as a registrar and assistant curator for Cranford Collection. That was with Dr. Andrew Renton, who's head of theory at Goldsmiths University. Did an MA in art management as well, and then worked for Momart Shipping Agency, who at the time was the premier shipping agency in the world. Gallery Services Department. Our team focused primarily on Damien Hirst, Rachel White-Read, White Cube, Gagosian, and Sadie Coles. In South Africa, I've worked as the person running Smack Gallery in Cape Town, and then I came to Everard Read Gallery 8 years ago. And yes, my roles have developed beyond head curator. I'm now director of the gallery.
Awesome, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I want to thank Art School Africa for hosting this amazing event and also extending the invites to me. My name is Mbilo Ngugana. I am a co-founder and director of 16 on Leratoli, which is an art gallery that is based KwaLanga, where I was born and raised. Through the grace of my parents, I was able to go to good schools. I went to Rondebosch Boys Primary School and High School. Thereafter, I attended UCT, where I got my BCom in Finance and Economics. Whilst I was still in high school, I embarked on my first entrepreneurial journey, which was a menswear apparel brand called Simon De Porus. My middle name is De Porus, and my partner's name was Simon, go figure. And we really focused on a minimal aesthetic and richness in quality. 10 years after we established the brand, we decided to close our doors. 2 months later, I was asked to be the head of Eurotex, which is an apparel company that supplies the Foschini Group with apparel. 8 months later, I resigned. It wasn't for me. And that's when I kind of really shifted my focus and decided to focus on the community that really made me who I was, which was Langa. And 2019, alongside my brother, Kanye Ngugana, and 2 friends, Sean Williams and Tulani Fesi, we opened up 16 on Leratoli.
So I'm Lena. I ended up in the art world completely accidentally. My background is in theatre. I started out at Everard Read in 2006. Expecting to be here for about 6 months. Still here. I'm currently an associate director here, but I did take a break for a couple of years to start 99 Loop, which is a small gallery in the center of Cape Town. So ran that for a couple of years and then came back here and found my home again.
Awesome.
Cool. So, like the kind of discussion points of last week, we're going to go through systematically everyone's opinion about the questions at hand. We've all sort of mutually agreed between ourselves it makes sense to start as sort of like the more organic, on-the-ground spaces. So as we start the questions, I think what we'll do is we'll start with Luca's project, move to your gallery, then Lena can talk about her professional experience with 99 Loop, and then we'll talk about the biggest sort of version of what we're in discussion about. Starting a gallery / project space. So outlining different types of galleries and what opening entails. That's quite a simple question, Luca.
So we are a project space. I'll start with what was required before opening. Kind of very little, mostly just to have the space, and then the people we worked with. So we had worked, myself and my collaborators had worked on a few projects in temporary spaces before that. And then one of the co-founders was walking. He saw a space up for lease. He messaged us and said, should we do it? We said, let's have a meeting. And then he said, I've signed the lease. Which is, his name's Brett Seeler. If you know him, this makes sense. So then we had the space. It was a ceramic studio before. So it was all tiled. There was lots of plumbing. It wasn't very white cubey at all. So we took 1 month to renovate, which we paid for ourselves. And then we opened with our first show a month after signing the lease. Mostly what it required was just a lot of work and a kind of optimistic faith in what we were doing. Especially in the early days, we were just working really hard after hours from our main jobs. And the way we run, so we don't do commission on sales. We're kind of trying a non-commercial model. Which works. There's obviously pros and cons to that. The challenge is finding alternative funding. We work on a patron system, but the part of it that works really well for us is it means we can show quite experimental work, and it also means we can show artists who are represented with other galleries. So obviously, usually if an artist is signed with a gallery, they're not going to go and show with another gallery in Cape Town. And we've been able to program artists who are signed with various galleries. We're not in competition with any galleries. We're kind of doing something a bit different, which means we can have quite a symbiotic relationship with the commercial art scene. And I think we kind of benefit each other in different ways. And that's been very productive for us. Is that the whole question?
Yeah, I mean, I think for anybody that wasn't here last week, commission structures means that when an artist brings work to a gallery, the gallery takes on certain kinds of responsibilities, mainly logistical, administrative, psychological. And for that, they get a percentage of the sales. So if my understanding is correct, Under Projects is self-funding, and we'll come to that a little later, but isn't taking a commission, which is a very intelligent way of circumnavigating very difficult waters.
It also just makes our finances simpler. We're happy to facilitate sales. Obviously, we want our artists to do well, but we will just put potential buyers in touch with the artists themselves.
Can I ask a little bit about how you got the finances together at the beginning to open up?
At the very beginning, it was just our own savings. And we could afford to do that at first. And then within the first month, we were very lucky. We had one patron who offered to pay 6 months of rent and operational costs. Which was immensely helpful. If we didn't have that, we would have only really had enough money from our savings to do about 3 months. So that kind of got us going. And then we did art fair recently, and we managed to get a lot more patronage there, which is kind of going to keep us going for the next 6 months. But it is quite precarious.
How do you do the sort of the patronage? How does that go? How does that happen?
Mostly just through conversation. I think everyone we meet is very curious. People always ask what we are, and then the next question is always, how does that work? Just kind of through dialogue with people. We're very active in art spaces. Between the four of us, we sort of have quite a wide network. And we're quite supported by the sort of commercial art scene. So like gallerists sometimes will give us money, or kind of people give what they can, and people who kind of are excited about what we're doing And we've been very lucky. People in Cape Town have been very generous with us.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Mapilo?
So I think I want to start off by going a little bit off course, and before I think you ask yourself how to start a gallery, I think it's very important to ask yourself why. And I'm sure that everyone on this panel will agree, if you want to start a gallery because you want to be rich and drink champagne and look at pretty pictures all day, you're not going to last. I think having a very compelling why, firstly, allows you to really kind of fuel yourself through the difficult times, because the business is not always up. And also, it also really allows you to resonate with people who share the mission, your mission with you, and that allows you to really kind of foster amazing partnerships and work with incredible people. So I think really asking why you want to start a gallery and having a compelling mission is extremely important. So on that, I think we started 16 on Leratoli in 2019, December. And most of you will know that was 3 months before COVID. We had spent about 350,000 Rand building the space. So we had to do some property development because it was a dilapidated building, but we had owned the property, but we had to really kind of build the space. So 3 months later, we had to close our doors. And that compelling reason of like why is the reason why I'm sitting here and we're still operating today. Our main mission is to really look at developing the community of Langa and also contributing to the democratization as well as the accessibility of art. We have a lot of artists that come from communities like Langa, but their artworks always get exported out of the communities. So we really wanted to be a space that can house some of those artworks to really inspire the youth to get involved in this incredible ecosystem called the art world. What it entails to start a gallery, I think really starting with a good concept and a vision, and really kind of planning out in detail where you want to be. I think it's very important to start with the end in mind, but then ask yourself, what's the minimum viable plan? What's the minimum viable project that I can do? I think in this day and age, with us having access to internet and Instagram, you can really start your journey of having a gallery today by opening up an Instagram account, having a website, things that are gonna be not as funding intensive and really kind of grow into the space that you really want to grow into. I think that also surrounding yourself with a team that shares the vision and shares your value is extremely important. Yeah.
How did you choose the space that you chose?
So the space that we chose is in Langa. It's on a tourist route. So the first day that we opened, we had between like 50 and 100 people walk through our door daily without doing any marketing. That was purely by us as partners sitting outside the gallery and watching people walk past. And that really kind of allowed us to see that there's a lot of potential. And I think that the 16 on Leratoli project is quite unique because of all those parts that kind of came together. I don't think I would have started a gallery if we had said, yeah, let's start one on Bree Street or Loop Street, because I understand the difficulties of that and the overheads that you have to really kind of pay from the get-go, you know. So we saw that opportunity. We really saw the opportunity of saying that we can have people kind of really walking through the doors without us really doing any marketing, because there was already a lot of traffic. And I just want to give you guys a little understanding of the space. So it's about a 80 square meter space, and it's attached to a courtyard, which is about 150 square meters. And the courtyard is where we want to have an outdoor eatery. We're planning an outdoor eatery because we're a destination gallery, because of us being in Langa. So we realized the importance of having people come to the space, but be able to spend time. Sometimes you come to a gallery and in about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, you've already looked at all of the art that is there. So we really wanted to kind of create a space that people can come and spend a long time there, etc. Yeah.
How did it kind of, because obviously you had the momentum when you opened and then COVID slammed the brakes on that.
Yeah.
So at what point post-COVID did you pick yourself up, dust yourself off and get back on the horse?
Yeah, so I think what the beauty of what COVID did is that it fast-tracked us being online. I think that we focused all of our attention on our online gallery because that's all we had, and it was kind of a gift in that way, because now we've got both of those kind of touch points working very well together, because we've got people who come in for about 10, 15 minutes, and most of the interaction is done via our website. So I think that us really focusing on building a well-designed and a robust website was extremely important to our survival. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I was very privileged in starting 99 Loop because I came from years of experience at Everard Read. So I had a great idea of what it takes to work in a successful gallery. And I had experience working in many roles, because I started out here at Everard Read as a gallery assistant, and that meant everything from being the registrar at the time to sales, to curation, admin, bit of everything. And I also had a financial backer starting 99 Loop, which was obviously very helpful because it meant I didn't have to worry about finding the money to convert the space that we had, which was a heritage building on obviously Loop Street. So we could focus our attention rather on deciding who we wanted to be in the Cape Town art world, because Cape Town is a very saturated arts environment. There are a lot of galleries. So we focused quite intensely for our entire renovation period on who we wanted to be as a gallery, the artists we wanted to work with, the kind of shows we wanted to do. And because of Cape Town heritage, we had quite a long time during renovations to sort all of that out. I think our renovations took a year and a half, primarily because of Cape Town heritage, which was a very frustrating experience. But it gave us the time to really focus on who we wanted to be. And I think in addition to deciding on that, what starting a gallery comes down to for me is paying attention to details. It's every single detail from your website, your business cards, what kind of lighting you're going to use, what kind of gallery benches you're going to have, what your opening hours are going to be. And it's about focusing on making all of those details come together and not letting any of those slip. And the other important thing is relationships, because as much as we are working with physical objects on the walls, what it really comes down to is relationships. And that's between the team that you're working with, your artists, your clients, PR, people who happen to walk through your doors. You obviously want to make a good impression on them, people who find you online, and people who become lifelong collectors. So it really does come down to relationships.
What's most interesting, if we just take a step back about the three panelists so far, is just kind of understanding the organic immediacy of the situations that they're in. And what I mean by that is that everybody on this panel, when they opened up, they were very much focused on refining from the go-get what the gallery stood for, what their principles were, who they wanted to work with, and almost building the strong foundations. You know, I can tell you a little bit about Everard Read. You know, what does it take to open a gallery? Well, this gallery's been open for over 110 years. So 110 years, apologies for anyone that heard this last week, 6 spaces in this country, bless you, 1 space in the UK. So many artists have come through these doors and so many artists remain with us. We're the largest physical commercial gallery in this country. And we are, as Mark Reed calls us, a battleship. But we weren't always a battleship. You know, Lena suggested a few of the nuances. You know, this gallery was opened in this country, I think in Cape Town 26 years ago?
1996.
Yeah. So in 1996, Charles Shields, who's the owner of Everard Read Cape Town and the director, and David Tripp, who at the time was also an owner and director, chose a selection of about 100 artworks, put it in the back of a car and drove from Johannesburg to Cape Town. They rented a space in the waterfront. In those days, it was much sexier. And literally, with their own 2 hands, put everything on the wall, designed it, decorated it, and waited. There were no commercial galleries, except maybe João Ferreira at that point in Cape Town. Michael Stevenson came to say hello to them. He had some artifacts under his arm. He hadn't opened a gallery yet. And as the years have gone on, so too has the gallery space grown. But important to acknowledge, even when you're looking at a established blue chip space, everybody starts at that beginning. And another point which will come up further in the conversation now is that everybody starts at the beginning doing everything. So all of us on this panel concurred, and we all can vouch for the fact that in order to foster a space, be it a project space or a small gallery or to join a lucrative large-scale gallery, one has to have a very clear concept and understanding of what it means to grow a gallery and start it. To slide into an established gallery doesn't give you the same grounding and foundation. So yeah, that's now we'll talk a little bit about questions, if there are any questions.
Does anyone have any questions about? Okay, hang on 2 seconds. We just want to grab this. No?
Hi, this is directed for Luca. I wanted to ask, since it's like under projects, it's a space that like you directly took money out of to make a space. Do you expect to ever recoup those costs, or like? Do you expect to ever recoup this cost, or is it something that like, okay, it's money I put in, it's like a project that I'm passionate, but like from the patronage or like the donations you get, like, do you ever, are you expecting to like recoup those costs like one day?
I think I could answer 2 ways. If I answered it pragmatically, no, not at this stage. We don't want to take money out of the organization. And if I answered it more romantically, I would say it's been recouped in terms of the space we've made. We all wanted to curate shows. We've had that opportunity. We've grown a huge network in terms of my practice as an artist and my curatorial practice. It has really grown a lot of my work. So I think the investment is paying off, and we also have quite a strong belief in our space, and we really want to keep it going. And that's more important than we're not at a stage yet where we would take money out of the organization, because the organization is still really trying to find its feet. So yeah, not in money terms, but I think in terms of opportunity and the work we've got through it, I feel like it has been recouped.
And I just want to add that just by virtue of remaining quite open and flexible, you've opened yourselves up to opportunities that perhaps if it had been more rigid and commercially, it wouldn't have gotten off the ground. I mean, Eigen, for example, maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Eigen Art is a gallery in Germany. So they've used our space. We kind of, they were actually the first commercial gallery to like make a kind of collaboration with us. Generally, our approach is people can use the space. If they can pay, they donate, and if they can't, then the space is free, which is nice. So it kind of like when a commercial gallery used our space, they made a donation, but if young artists are using our space, then it's free, and we support them. And with anyone who uses the space, we offer installation and PR, and we hang all the art ourselves. Yeah.
May I just mention something on that? So what's interesting from a commercial gallery perspective is to have access to a space, because Eigen flies in here for specific projects. They're a very, very important European German gallery. During Cape Town Art Fair, they do a pop-up show, which is fantastic. It's captive audience, museums, curators, internationals. So by the project space hosting them, the project space is also benefiting with complete integrity to the access to their collector bases, the museums, and allowing, you know, the more contact, the more international contact that comes about, the more successful, the broader the reach.
Yeah.
So it's a very successful way of doing things.
Yeah, and we also like to always reiterate that we're not running as a commercial gallery, but we're not in opposition to the commercial galleries in our community. Like we have, I think, a good kind of like mutually beneficial partnership where I think we provide quite a like productive experimental space, and a lot of curators and directors from the sort of top commercial galleries come to our exhibitions. They see the young artists, and then we also benefit from the commercial market in terms of there being so many practicing artists in Cape Town, and yeah, there's sort of those avenues.
And I mean, what's interesting from a commercial gallery perspective is I think, you know, I can talk here with some kind of sort of authority about this gallery being so big, but actually when we opened up the space in London, that was very touch and go. So the idea originally was to open up a space in Europe, and one of the directors flew to London. She lived in London. And we all kind of had the vision of 1 year was the plan, to keep it going for 1 year. And what I mean by that was it wasn't supplemented by the gallery here. It was structured in a way that it had to cover its own costs, and it was touch and go. So the choices were very, very pragmatic. And perhaps you can both talk about the pragmatic choices of keeping the lights on, because it's one thing to sort of receive donations and rely on that. It's quite another when you have to make very sober choices very early on to ensure that you generate enough sales so that you can continue to grow and continue to experiment. And from our gallery's perspective, when we opened London, you know, we would sit there meticulously planning these shows and guaranteeing that the artists that we chose in the beginning were going to be sellable artists, because if we had 2 or 3 heavy hitters, for want of a better word, that would generate enough income to then sustain the more sort of unusual shows that London could host. And to this day, you know, we all kind of joke about it, but nothing gets on that airplane unless we all think it can sell. You know, here we have a lot more flexibility and a lot more fun. There's a lot more breathing space. But the London gallery still, you know, every single time a show opens, it's not down to the wire, but it counts. You know, there's no flexibility there. Could you perhaps discuss some of the choices that you made in terms of the artists you were showing, and then you subsequent, Leonard, just to kind of generate enough monetary sales to keep going?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, for us, it was extremely important for the co-founders to really be hands on deck and really keep our costs as low as possible. So again, that meant we have to do all the work, whether it be the marketing, whether it be some of the hanging, whether it be really the maintenance, and having that commercial aspect to it of having works that's sellable, but also that is got meaning behind it. You know, where it's not just pretty. There's a meaning behind what you're selling. And for us, the interesting thing is that we don't know who's going to walk through our door at any moment in time. It could be a art collector that we've never heard of. So for us, it's really important to, as you were saying, be meticulous with and have respect for everyone that walks through the door and treat everyone as a potential client. You know, I think that that's been very important for us converting sales, because people, and we kind of playing in an interesting game, because a lot of people come to the gallery space not expecting a gallery, because you're in a township. So now having people that are coming not expecting a gallery, and then having to sell an artwork that is a certain price point, is there's a certain like dance to that we have to really kind of maintain our. We feel like we have to be even more professional just because of where we are, you know, and that it really does help a lot, being very, very meticulous about how we operate, how we treat people, and how we welcome people into our gallery.
So Emma used a very interesting word that stood out for me, which was integrity. And I think that very much applies to the gallery world, because you are dealing with a business, but it's a very ephemeral business that relies a lot on honesty, as I said, relationships, and quite frankly, what can be very large amounts of money. So kind of muscling our way into the Cape Town art world as a baby gallery. Even though 99 Loop is physically a big space, we were absolute nobodies. Sure, I had some background in the art world. Monet, the owner and director, had absolutely no experience in the art world other than being a collector and a lover of art. So trying to find our footing amongst all the other established galleries was an interesting experience. We had to find artists who we felt represented what we wanted to achieve with the gallery, and who we thought we could sell, but who didn't work with other galleries, who weren't represented by other galleries. Obviously, emerging artists, their work sells for less, so you have to sell more, so that you kind of have the volume for turnover, which is very tricky if nobody has ever heard of you, nobody has ever set foot in your gallery before. So I did mention that we had Monet as a financial backer, which was fantastic, but the idea again was within a very short space of time to be self-sufficient, which I'm very proud to say we did achieve. And by the time I left 99, we were actually paying the salaries on gallery income for the restaurant, which we were running next door. Never mind paying artists and paying gallery staff and gallery running costs. We were paying salaries for a completely different business, which was not doing so well at the time.
Well done.
Yeah.
Another question?
Yeah, we did have one.
Hi, thank you very much. Some of the questions.
That's all right, keep going.
Some of the questions have been answered. It's kind of a general question just across the board. Under project is kind of a new look at an old patronage system. What would you say is a good way to kind of negate more traditional styles, business models that exist versus the more risky, kind of challenging the industry, community in that way? Like trying out different business models and things like that. Would you say there's an interest for that? From the community and from...
Can you just give an illustrative example when you say different business models? Just so I understand.
So their under projects isn't necessarily making any income. So that's a different kind of space. At 99 Lives also kind of chose that space and what they wanted to say. What I'm trying to ask is it better to maybe do the more rigid structures, which has been mentioned, or do you actually lose out by kind of just working your way into the system as it is?
Interesting question. I wouldn't use the word system, I would use the word ecosystem. And there are elements within the industry which are more, in inverted commas, organic and don't necessarily have to pay salaries. There isn't as much pressure on them. But the reality is that barring at some point maybe it will become a business. But I mean, we are in the business of making money and sustaining artists and sustaining technicians and sustaining staff members. So in that regards, it functions as a very intricate ecosystem. You know, the next series of questions is going to be about sort of the infrastructure of galleries and what it entails to kind of structure one. You know, the great thing about the South African art market is that you can open up a space in this country in a very informal capacity, and for the most part, if it's doing interesting work, it'll be supported. It will be nurtured and supported, and you know, for the most part, all of us in the industry, when we hear that a smaller gallery closes down, we're all kind of disappointed, you know? Like, for example, when Smith had to close their doors, they were fucking brilliant. You know, it was actually a really sad day when that happened. So it's, in that regards, I think there is a camaraderie in this industry, and whilst there is a kind of infrastructure and cohesion to that, there's lots of reasons for that, you know? That said, if somebody wants to start something totally different, they should do so. But I don't believe there are many flexible business models to keeping lights on. You know, at the end of the day, you've got to have a space, you've got to be professional, you've got to sell interesting work, you've got to pay your artists. You know, those are very standardized, basic principles, which I suppose creates some kind of formal structure. Anybody else want to respond?
I have an answer to that as well. In terms of the structures, also something I've noticed with under projects specifically, a lot of times when we say we're not doing commissions, people sort of think like, oh, how are you going to survive? And it is precarious. But I do think for us, it is actually the reason we've managed to survive. I think if we opened a tiny little space, very shabbily, and we're trying to run as a commercial gallery, we would have closed in 2 months. And running the way we do, we've exhibited really top artists. We've had William Kentridge in our space. We've had like Zander Blom. We've had a lot of really successful gallery represented artists because I think there's a trust in our space because we're not trying to run on that model. So we've kind of like developed a reputation. So I think at our scale, not trying to run like a gallery has actually been beneficial. I don't know how sustainable it is. Project spaces usually have quite a short lifespan. But I think if we'd done a commission structure from the get-go, we would have closed down because, you know, like you were saying, the challenge of trying to find artists who aren't gallery represented, I think it would have been a lot tougher. And so there's ways we've benefited in terms of our like cultural capital in the city from using an alternative model that isn't translating to a lot of salaries, but it does mean we're kind of building a reputation that I think is valuable.
And I just want to mention something else that Lena was talking about nurturing and fostering younger artists who are unrepresented. You know, there are examples in our stable as well of artists who have started off, we call it second tier galleries, so not blue chip galleries. And they begin at a certain price point and the artist begins their career with them and they get taken to art fairs and they get cultivated. And at some point, the gallery can't sustain them. You know, we have artists in our stable who used to work with other galleries and they would have to make 60 paintings in a show in order just to cover their costs. So the price point of the collector base was limited, the accessibility was limited, and at some point the artist would leave the stable. And that can be incredibly disruptive for younger galleries because often these artists are the most financially successful that carry the weight of everyone else. But it's the cycle. You know, artists also outgrow galleries as well.
Yeah, and I also think it's important to not only look at the present. I mean, would love to represent South Africa's top artists, but sometimes you also need to look at the future. You need to look at artists that have got potential. I mean, for me, something that would be most fulfilling would be artists that we can start together and we can grow kind of in a synergy and really kind of not only grow with artists but also grow with new collectors because the collectors today are not going to be the collectors tomorrow. So it's really about how do you also look at the future and not only just plan for the present. I think that's very important, and that's what our space really wants to do. We want to be involved in artist development. We want to take kids who've got potential and give them opportunities and be able to say in like 10, 15 years, oh, you know, we started together and look where we are now. I think that's also something that we really need to look for as a young gallery as well, and not only just look at, oh, this person is doing amazing right now, I would love to represent them. I think it's also about looking towards the future. I think that's very important.
Yeah.
There have been some very interesting shifts I've noticed in the last couple of years, though, with regards to how the rest of the world is looking at South African emerging artists. I'll just use the word vultures because I think that's what I get. Because I feel a couple of years ago, you could find young South African artists, maybe recent graduates, people who are trying new things, and you, as a South African gallery, could work with them and build a relationship looking towards the future. These days, there's so many international galleries who want to work with young African artists because they recognize how much talent and creativity we have here. And because of Instagram and the internet and how easy everything is, they can just jump on these younger artists, take them overseas, what happens to local galleries? What happens to those artists when international trends change and they can no longer achieve the European prices that they've established overseas in South Africa because the market is so different here? So it's been very interesting watching that happen.
Any more questions for this section?
One more. Nicole? You have the mic.
I'll just say from our gallery's perspective, it's very interesting when international galleries go through our artist stable and email each person trying to get hold of them.
They don't go through you, do they do that?
No, seriously, just same email. And then I get 10 emails.
My question is about Liratoli, and I think I might have the name wrong.
16 on Liratoli.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just where you're based, do you do community work, or do artists come in? Is there an engagement with the people around you? I personally would love to get involved in a space that's with a community and with community focus, but also marrying a commercial gallery focus. So I feel like that's an interesting perspective because it kind of like feeds two needs at the same time. Yeah.
So I think with our gallery, I think the end goal, and this is something that we've spoken with Emma about and Lena as well, is that we do want to start hosting workshops. We do want to start really doing artist development within the community because it's very much needed. We're at the stage now where we're trying to just find our feet as a commercial gallery, but with that being said, there's small, beautiful moments that happen within the gallery that don't need a workshop. Like every day, we've got kids that are coming home from school that come into the gallery and get to experience art. This is something that they would never be able to do just because of they go to school in the same neighborhood that they live, and they basically never really leave that ecosystem. So there is that, and we do want to start really getting into more the programming of development. And I think that our whole reason for being there is community development. So one of the projects that we're involved with that is involved with a lot of community development is that adjacent to the gallery, we've got a 1,500 square meter plot of land that is an urban farm. And to date, through our organization called the Masake Foundation, which is our NPO wing, we've been able to raise 2 million rand for that urban farm. And with that, we've also been able to develop an agri-hub, which is something that is supporting the 31 other urban farms within Gwalanga. So before we started, people had to travel 50 minutes by public transport just to get things like seedlings and compost. But since we've been able to network them, we've managed to drop their input costs by 80%. And that project alone has 135 beneficiaries that are in the urban farm kind of element. And we're looking to do the same thing with the art. It's unfortunate that schools in Langa and in other poorer areas don't offer art as a subject. That's a big problem for us, and that's something that we really want to kind of start looking at and addressing. But I think we've got a lot of things happening. So it's really about us kind of planning for the future, but also tackling the things that are there right now. So in the future, in about a couple of months, we will definitely have artist development programs. Hopefully we'll get Art School Africa out to Langa to do a couple of talks, etc. So that's why we're there. We want to be an institution that is a home for artists, firstly, and a community kind of institution that uses art as a tool to develop the community, foster empathy, understanding, and solidarity between the community of Langa and South Africa as a whole.
Can I ask, with the context of Langa, what are you struggling and what are you finding very beneficial of being in a context like Langa compared to being in a context like the waterfront or like town?
Yeah, I think an immediate challenge that we're struggling with right now is litter. I mean, we try to beautify our space. We try to really make it a clean space, but around us is just so much litter, and that is due to a few things. I mean, we've on Liratoli Avenue, we've tried to engage the city of Cape Town with regards to bins. There's only one bin on the whole street, and that is like, it's crazy. So we, before we even can ask people not to litter, we need to give them a place where they can actually throw their litter away. So that these small little community challenges that are not really even got to do with art. But again, we can use art as a tool. I mean, Mr. Mark was Reichenbach uses recycled materials and waste to create artwork sometimes, and this is a conversation that I'd love to have with him. How do we get the youth to kind of look at litter in a different light, you know, where it can be kind of upcycled and all these things. So those are the challenges that we face, which are more like community-based challenges, and it's just amazing to be there though on the other side. I mean, the community of Langa is so vibrant. It is people are so happy. People greet you. People that don't know you greet you. It's a true essence of what a community is to me, you know. So that really helps out, and people come in and they offer assistance, and they really want to kind of be a part of our project and assist us to take it to the next step, essentially.
So next topic, careers in the gallery / project space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you like to start us off?
I can, yeah. In terms of careers, and from my experience, is kind of that you have to do everything, which I think everyone has said. If I listed my roles at under projects, it would probably go from like co-director, curator, programmer, installer, toilet cleaner. Like you have to do a lot of different things, and distribute labor amongst your collaborators or co-workers according to capacity and skills, which is how we've done it. So we don't have formal roles, but some of us are stronger on the admin side and the writing side, so we do that kind of work. I don't know what I can say about careers in terms of viable careers, because we're still working mostly voluntarily. But it certainly is a good space to get experience that I think you can carry into different areas. Like I was offered a job this year lecturing in curatorial practice, which I think came directly from curating shows at under projects. So the sort of opportunity is that you can walk into a much sort of higher grade role than you would in a more established organization, which is one cool opportunity, but you do have to be willing to do everything, like all the jobs. The only jobs we don't do is bartending. We hire bartenders, but other than
That's like the...
yeah, other than that, we are painting the walls, we're washing the floor, we're packaging the artwork, doing all the PR, we're negotiating with art fair. You know, it's really, the labor's not really devised by role currently.
I like to think of the analogy of a swan when it comes to working in the galleries, where on the surface everything is beautiful and elegant, but underneath it's like
the art swan.
The art swan. I mean, I was literally elbow deep in the pond earlier trying to rescue a fish in our koi pond, and
That is a first for us, though, I have to say. Like, I don't. You got that one. That's the first one. Careers, like, I mean, when I think just to. Obviously, careers is the wrong kind of language to use for you. I think probably I will have more to say in Lena, but just talk a little bit about like the roles and responsibilities within your space and the trajectories.
Yeah.
You know, maybe a little bit more about the infrastructure as well.
Yeah. So I think with us, we've got roles that we've kind of earmarked for our future growth when we can afford to have people in these roles, and we've got an organogram that's in our business plan that we want to, but again, we're the ones filling all those roles. So we've got art director, head curator. That's one role that we want to fill, but again, we have to do that ourselves. And I think through partnerships, we are assisted with that. We've got a role of financial manager and grants funding application. Again, we have to do that. And then we've got marketing and communication and PR is one. And then another segment would be our events and kind of operations, and then building management where that would entail making sure that we want to paint for the new exhibition, or we need to fix a window or fix a leak. So those are the positions that we've really earmarked, but again, we will organically grow into that once we have we're kind of growing. So.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important to acknowledge that a lot of gallery jobs don't actually have to do with art. Some of the most important roles and the people that really make everything work would be your driver, your accountant. You absolutely cannot function without people handling those roles or those tasks, and having people who really know what they're doing, because that can make all the difference. And then just in terms of talking about other roles, registrar, I mean, do we want to do that?
I mean, we can break, I mean, so this is where it's quite interesting, because obviously, and this is how we wanted it to go about in this conversation, where you got the real nuts and bolts of starting things off the ground, getting things off the ground, and then starting to establish commercial gallery, and then you come to this animal.
Beast.
This beast. Elegant beast. Elegant. But, you know, these galleries function with degrees of, and Lena's going to laugh, effortlessness. And it happens because we have a very big team and everyone makes a very big contribution. You know, from the people in the storeroom who understand exactly where everything is and follow everything and wrap it and move it and hang it and fix things and carry things. And, you know, an artist talks to you about wanting to install a projection and a curtain and a rod and things dangling and machinery, and you know, we have people on the ground who understand how to make that all work. So if you can construct things, if you have a team that understands the nuts and bolts and knows where the artwork is, do not laugh, because sometimes people don't know where their artworks are. You need people to be in charge of organizing things, wrapping things properly, labeling it. That's like the basic foundation. Then you have the next tier of people who take this work and deliver it. We have a storeroom team. The storeroom team has a storeroom manager. One of those people as well goes to our offsite location. Pipe in if I forget anything. Because we have a warehouse where we store things that are to be shipped, and we also have a warehouse where we do our off-site crating. Then we have a driver and his partner. Actually, we have 2 drivers, because what we realized is that we needed to have a person who was in charge of these things and a backup person in case that person was on holiday or very sick. So we always have pairs. So we have Riyadh and Cliff, who usually go around driving, installing, hanging, collecting, fetching, delivering, and
massaging client egos.
Big on the ground. You'd be amazed. These are our front line. When we've sold something to a client, presentable, articulate, for the most part, competent with the machinery. Do you know what I mean? So you're asking your team, once somebody spent 450,000 Rand on something, you have to have a frontline team that know what they're doing and can deliver it professionally and neatly and get it done. All of these things that I'm just running off, this is stuff that when you're getting off the ground, you're doing it all on your own. The luxury of having a fully staffed team who can administer and hang a show in a day or 2 days or 3 or a couple of hours in some instances. A team that can deliver work so that you can plan, and if a client wants to see something, you can just put it into the van. All of these variables are the difference between an efficient gallery, a successful gallery, a commercial sale. Then you have the administrative team. You have the accounts department, who should not be underestimated. We have 2 people in the accounts department. It's a full-time job. Spreadsheets, paying, receiving monies. Cheryl, who runs our accounts department, doesn't just do it for our gallery, she also does it for the other galleries in the Cape Town area. Logistics team. So there's 2 people in the logistics team. What happens to the work once it's sold? The shipping, the exporting, the importing, the crating, the logistics, the deliveries, the unpacking, the checking.
VAT, customs.
The customs, the export documentation, the SARS compliant export documentation. We have 2 people full-time with that, and that is full on, non-stop. The quotes, the multiple quotes for the clients. Then we have the front of house staff, so the people that are in charge of monitoring what's going in and out of the gallery. The registrar. The registrar is the person who keeps track of the movement of work. So you have an artwork, it's labeled, it leaves the building, it goes somewhere, it then stays there, then moves. Somebody has to follow that with a paper trail. Somebody has to update our art system. Somebody has to take all of these works into stock, photograph them, document them, write the label on the back, put it on the system, load it up. There's one person that does that. One person, because that person needs to know everything about everything. And then Waib, has somebody he's training. So there's a whole infrastructure in place there. Then there's front of house, but also design, social media. Lena's in charge of the design and social media and sort of, I would say, overseeing the Cape Town Everard Read side. I want to talk a little bit about your roles and responsibilities.
I mean, that is...
the official roles and responsibilities, that'll be in my next paragraph.
I mean, we've talked a little bit about the internet and online galleries and interfacing with people online, which is where a lot of it is happening these days. So it requires a hell of a lot of attention and work. I mean, quite frankly, you could have one person alone doing social media marketing. But as per usual in the gallery world, it's a little bit of everything. But because that is a huge part of how your audience gets to know you, it requires a lot of time and planning and knowing what audiences are expecting, what audiences are wanting, understanding what trends are as technology changes, because it changes so fast, I can't even keep up. Yeah.
And then that's what Lena officially does. What that doesn't include is the sales, the trips to the artist studios, the trips to the collectors,
trips to the framers,
the rescuing of fish. I mean, there is a very, very broad, I mean, this is just like the official roles. Yeah. And then you have the directors who sit there eating peeled grapes. No, I'm kidding. No, and then so you have individuals who make sort of decisions based on a broader perspective, who initiate sort of decisions that have an impact financially for the gallery. You know, we have a curatorial team, and what that means is that obviously there is somebody who's in charge of that, but we have a team, so you have to construct an ethos and an energy. You have to choose artists. You have to build an exhibition calendar. And then you all have to sit together and you have to imagine that somebody has to know when the work's going to be framed. Somebody has to collect the work. Someone has to take it into stock, or it has to be shipped and then taken into stock. You have to sit down. You have to decide how you're going to hang it. Someone has to design the portfolio. Somebody has to do the social media. Somebody has to spend time with the artist. Someone then has to sell the work. Then once the work's sold, then the whole thing starts over again. So when you think about all of that, right? And you imagine that in the very, very beginning that was done by how many people? 4 people? 4 people, 4 people. In the case of Charles and David, 2 people. You can understand that that sort of baptism of fire allows you to get a very, very good understanding of what it entails to run a gallery. You know, this gallery is a very, very well-oiled machine, and it's taken a very long time for us to get here. And we can manage the capacity that we do because there's a lot of individuals stepping in and making sure everything turns in a fluid motion. That said, though, I think the majority of us have had so many experiences in so many different parts of a gallery that we understand what it takes for our fellow, you know, members of staff to do what they need to do. Any questions? Oh, cleaners. I'm sorry. The cleaners is also another one.
Emma, I think you mentioned this last week as well, but when you're juggling so many things and so many roles, how do you avoid being burnt out? How do you ensure that you actually sustain yourself for long enough to make an impact on the industry?
Good question.
It's a very good question. And you know, I have to say that in this industry, there is a lack of personal care. The problem is that it never stops. So we are planning exhibitions 2 years from now. You know, I'm in conversation with artists about shows that are happening in London or in Johannesburg. I've been talking for 1.5 years to some artists. There are artists that we're slowly starting to talk to and spend time with, that we have a vision of working with them in 3 years' time on an exhibition. I think the secret, because I've been in this industry now for 27 years, I know, is to have a really good team that all show up. And if you have a really good team, you can be more productive and you can designate roles and responsibilities, you can delegate, and then you won't get burned out because you can move on to the next thing.
And I think also, I mean, not just good in terms of you individually are good at what you do, but the interrelationship is very important because that can be draining too, right? If you
in any industry, yeah.
Come into work and you just hate the person you're sitting next to.
Well, we don't have any of that here, thankfully.
No,
but I mean, I have worked in spaces where you've had to, I mean, not to sound dramatic, but you've got to walk against the wall. You know, when I was working in London, like there are places, you know, it's all sounds very romantic. You know, we're all 4 sitting up here talking about circumstances in our own capacity where it was more pleasant experiences, give or take. But it's not always the case. This industry is incredibly demanding and relentless, and it's not like academia where they close at certain times of the year for holidays and people write. You know what I mean? Respectfully to academics. You know, the art industry doesn't stop. You know, once an exhibition stopped, the next 5 are behind. Today we had a meeting for 2 hours discussing the next 6 shows, and that's just in the next few months. So you have to have boundaries, you have to take care of yourself, you have to stop, you have to understand that you're one human being, and you have to be able to delegate. You have to work with a team that you can trust. And we are, you know, from our perspective, we are a very, very strong team now, you know. We had our moments, you know, and the great thing about this industry is it's a tough industry, and people that aren't strong enough and haven't got a very strong work ethic don't last. You know, it burns you out.
And I do think you have to remember to look at the art. It sounds so simple and stupid, but it's very easy when you are working so hard and you have such tight deadlines and so much admin, that something that can give you that sense of personal fulfillment and can help with your mental health is on the walls around you and in the other galleries. So if you spend time engaging with what this is all about, that does definitely feed back and help a lot.
That's a really good point. I mean, I have to say, like, it's incredibly demanding as an industry and it's incredibly relentless, but it's an absolute blessing. You know, like, we get to come into the space and work with creatives and help them manifest their ideas and, you know, act as really integrous vessels for something amazing. And every so often you kind of stop and something comes into the gallery and everyone goes, ooh. And everyone go, you know, and it's an incredible privilege to be able to do that. And I know it sounds cliched, but it is. It's wonderful to be part of something that feeds the soul. So definitely. Any more questions?
Yeah, one's for Luca. Is this working, Julia?
It's for the recording, sorry.
So it sounds amazing to think that you would allocate tasks on a who's good at what basis. And I imagine that having only 4 members is better than a larger organization. But is it fair, or does one person tend to carry the team? And if you're all artists, do you all privilege your own practice as much as everybody else's, or is one?
I would say, if you mean fair as in do we all work the same number of hours, then no, it's not quantitatively fair. But the idea with doing it by capacity is just that people have different capacities. So like myself and Mitchell do most of the like admin side, which is a lot. But it's kind of according to where our skills are. And we all are pretty like willing to help. But I think like group work is tough. And I know when like I was at school, it would feel like there's always someone who's doing more work. It was often me. And it felt very unfair. But as an adult, and especially because we respect each other, I have a slightly different idea of what's fair. And we're all kind of friends outside of the space. And we understand if someone's having a bad day, we know why. And it's small enough that we can manage that. And like last year, it got a little tough. Like 2 of us did get quite burnt out from taking on a lot of the weight. But then we had a conversation. We said we need to slow down the programming. And we're small enough that we can do that. But yeah, it's not fair in terms of hours. But I think everyone brings something. And if you're going to go into a collaborative partnership, you need to trust each other and you need to respect each other's contribution, and understand that over time, everyone is going to contribute in the ways that they can. And that might look very different. You know, like not everyone can sit all day and answer emails or manage the social media, but then people will bring other things. Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine that the success lies in capitalizing on everyone's strengths.
Yeah, like if we put Brett in charge of the emails, we would not do well. But when it comes to making connections and networking, and we're all offering a lot, I wouldn't say there's anyone in Under Projects who isn't working really hard and isn't committed to it. But yeah, I wouldn't trust him with the emails anyway. But yeah, it's not maybe equal in hours, but it is fair. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, there's a lady behind you as well.
Okay, I'll be quick. So I hope this is going to make sense. But so the way I see it in the art world, you've got your artists and you've got the people who support the artists, right? And something I feel really strongly about is that I think there's a lack of support or resources out there for the people who are supporting the artist as to what they can do. Like, what are the different careers that you can do in that space, right? And that's a really big part of why we started Arts for Africa, is to kind of, in a way, formalize
the different parts of the art world and what are the different roles that you can take in the space. Okay? A question I'd like to pose is, do you guys think that it's important to formalize the different roles within different organizations? Because if you look at, maybe overseas, like if you look at in a gallery space or museum space, there's very specific roles that people are doing.
Yeah.
You are a registrar or you are a curator in this very specific thing. So I wanted to ask you, do you think there's a need for that in South Africa, or do you think people need to be taking on the roles, like what you said, of being more fluid within spaces and not fulfilling a very specific kind of
I think that I'll answer it in a commercial capacity. So I think that we all have our designated roles and we know what we're responsible for, but we often kind of all discuss amongst ourselves that if you're fulfilling that role and responsibility, then if there's something else that you're interested in, you can explore that. That said, though, I think the nature of all the personalities in this gallery is that if something comes up and we see it, then we're not going to just say, well, it's not my responsibility to handle it. And that can be really sort of small pragmatic things like putting the chairs out for this evening. Or it could be, having conversations. We have like 50 conversations with each other a minute. We're listening to everyone else's conversations so everyone knows what's going on. So I think that there's an element within the commercial sector of having responsibilities and roles, but it's also about the personality type. And you're either somebody who takes the initiative and multitasks, or you're quite rigid. And obviously there are rigid roles within this gallery space. I mean, Riyadh's responsibility is to be the driver and the liaison in terms of front line and to hang. It's not his responsibility to take items into stock but administratively speaking, we all have very core key roles and then we branch out. And then there's roles that come up that we didn't even know we needed, and those continue to expand in different directions. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I would also think that it obviously depends on how big your organization is, right? There are needs that need to be fulfilled, whether there's 2 of you, whether there's 3 of you, whether there's 10 of you. So if you've got only 2 people in your organization because you're starting off, then I think that those kind of roles need to be set. But again, it needs to be more fluid than if there's a team of 15 or 20, So I also think it's very much depending on the scale of your business as well as on where you are in the journey.
And museums are different animals, there's a much more of a bureaucracy and infrastructure there. There are so many roles in supporting artists. If you imagine and envisage the artist is the creative voice that manifests the idea. In order for that idea to be shown, seen, displayed, marketed, documented, taken care of, installed, sold, there's a ripple effect. And there usually are quite straightforward sort of niches of roles for that. But again, that's the wonderful thing about this industry. Do you know what I mean? Like, we don't all necessarily need to come from art backgrounds in order to be successful in this industry. It's in order to function in the gallery space, one has to have a sensibility, I believe, and an interest and a fascination in art. But you don't necessarily have to have only studied art. Pilo, what was a business and finance degree?
Economics and finance.
Economics and finance, So I mean, like and often you will find people gravitating to this industry, working very successfully, especially in the kind of managerial or administrative or registrar curation, who do come from different backgrounds, for sure.
In some ways, you've just answered my question, but I wanted to also speak a little bit about, on the one hand, the benefits of being an artist and then working in the gallery space, and also the difficulties of balancing that. Like, how do you kind of balance being a practicing artist and having relationships with artists as an artist, with then having a kind of gallerist relationship? And then also, the difficulties or the benefits of not being an artist in the gallery space.
Anyone else want to answer? I think I would struggle to be a practicing artist and work with artists, in the capacity that I do. Studied art, but I do feel like the amount of focus and attention and dedication that's required in order to manifest one's own ideas, to then try to even project that kind of effort onto somebody else and to understand what they're going through and to focus on that. I don't know how it's possible. I don't know how people go home having worked in a gallery and try to make their own work. It just, because it is all encompassing. To do it properly, it's all encompassing. You know, you have to live and breathe the creative experience with the artist. You have to immerse yourself in their story. You have to spend time understanding the personality and the nuances of what makes them tick. And then you've got to go home and do that for yourself. I just don't know. Congratulations to anyone that can do that. But yeah, I would struggle.
I mean, you say that, and I've quite enjoyed working with Brett since he's been involved with under projects, because I think he has more of an appreciation now for what we do, having had to be a curator and do some of the admin at under projects. So I think he, as an artist, we work very closely with now, has more of an understanding of what we're actually doing on our side. But I think, I mean, Luca, you're an artist, so.
Well, I'm not working in the gallery, but it is hard to balance. And generally, especially being like a part-time practicing artist, usually like the organizational work comes first, which I think just has happened because it's like I don't know, I think if you're working part-time and making art part-time, you're often gonna struggle to find time to make art. And that has happened, but I also think working in a different space has been conducive in terms of growing a network and encountering a lot of art that I'm very excited by. I think you can't, the sort of old stereotype of an artist like alone in their studio is quite outdated for most practicing artists now. You definitely are going to spend a few nights alone in your studio, but a lot of your work is being out with people and encountering other artists. So I think in that way it's helpful. But it has required a lot of Sundays spent making art.
I also think it's the personalities as well. Do you know what I mean? Some artists need to be immersed in their own space, in solitude, and there's an intensity and it takes time. Some artists, in my experience, will spend a lot of time thinking and then they will manifest the idea relatively quickly. But, you know, it's not a criticism to say that somebody can't be an artist and be a gallerist. I just think that it depends on the level of responsibility and what the role is, and how invested as a gallerist one needs to be in the creative process and manifestation of someone else. That's full on and that's full time. I mean, we all have artists who speak to all of us, and it's like a relationship. Each artist requires your focus and undivided focus and attention, and understandably, So to then separate oneself from that complexity and try to focus it again, I mean, would be difficult.
And I like to think of being a curator as being an artist, but instead of working with paint, you're working with paintings.
There's definitely, obviously there's a creative element for all of us, that's where the joy comes in. And building collections, it sounds really kind of business-like and pragmatic, but it's actually a joyful experience when you see how people fall in love with things and then they have it in their homes and it grows and it becomes part of the family. We had one artist, Shani Vandenberg, and she had a show a few years ago, and the son of one of her collectors came to buy his first painting from her show, and it was just a beautiful moment, that he'd grown up with her painting on their family wall, and his first painting was going to be one by her. So, that kind of cultivation, those friendships, that relationship, that trust that comes with cultivating collections as well, that's also a creative process, I believe.
Oh, it's fine, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I love this microphone. It's like a talking stick. No, you may talk now. Next time you need to get a long rod and just with a little fuzzy thing.
The question I want to kind of ask is navigating wearing a lot of hats as a young gallery space of being an artist and really wanting to make art with a lot of meaning. And on the other side, maybe having collectors who are more interested in the STEM world or the finance, who aren't really as interested in the deeper meaning, or when you start explaining more of that side kind of lose interest. How do you kind of navigate building work with meaning, but also appealing to your accidentally built target audience who are buying more and more of maybe the same kind of work that might be stumping growth, but is paying the bills? And how do you kind of navigate that?
I mean, can I jump in?
No, please do.
I think part of that is, as a gallerist, being able to read someone and to give them what they want to create the connection that they want. Some people want to know every single detail of an artwork and its deeper meaning. Some people want the artist's pedigree. What was the last art fair they showed at? What museum shows have they been in? And it's our job to provide the information that they want. I mean, quite often part of what we do is sell works by artists that we don't like, whether it's their work or their personality. So it's about being able to read people on the other end and give them what they want, and understanding that the kind of net benefit is for everybody. So someone has a work that they want, artist gets the sale, we get the sale, the world is a better place.
I think what's interesting about that observation is that we often, if somebody's talking about work with passion and sincerity, they would assume that that would be important. But a lot of people who venture into spaces to purchase work, there are a lot of personalities flying around, a lot of egos, you know, whether intentional or not. And often people just want to experience things on their own terms. And it's very hard when an artist is on the front line doing that, sort of having to let go of the meaning in order for the person to appreciate the aesthetics or the color or the frame. But actually we have to also give people permission to enjoy things or appreciate things in their own languages, you know. We try very, very hard, unless prompted, not to demystify the experiences of people, to lay it all out, you know. And often, you know, it is incredibly insightful into human beings, into couples, into personalities, into insecurities, to see how people venture into this gallery and how they approach it, what they want to do. Body language. You know, sometimes you walk up to somebody and they want to chat. They want to get, sometimes they're just like, do not talk to me. And it's not because they're an uncomfortable human being. It's because people experience the world around them in different ways. So you do learn to read people, and you also learn to detect bullshit. You know, that's also another one. Was someone else asking? One of my top bullshit stories. Okay.
To what degree, just on the sort of other side of that equation, and in your relationships with the artists themselves, to what degree, I mean, clearly, particularly the commercial galleries, where you do need to sell, to what degree do you, in the engagement with the artists that you are representing, do you direct or find ways of discussing, you know, the production of work that is going to be saleable? Because a lot of people produce, I mean, some artists will have a theme and a space and a place and a way of doing things that is very consistent because that's very saleable, but they're not necessarily doing much else. That, yeah, so to what degree do you intervene or engage in that process?
I think it's a very heavily invested, intense, focused relationship that needs to be built. I think one has to understand as a gallerist that an artist is not a conveyor belt or a factory, that it comes from their very being. And so in order to, in my own experience, speak to the artist with integrity and to understand the work with integrity, you need to spend time with it. You need to ask questions. You need to follow the process from the very beginning. And by understanding and unpacking what is going through the artist's process, what their ideas are, what their concerns are, what their successes are, then it's about manifesting the best version of that. Now, 99% of the time, if you can act as a support structure, as the gallery can act as a support structure, as a conduit, as a resource for the artist to give them the support to do that, then the best result will be of benefit to everyone. If there are instances where somebody is going down a rabbit hole, then, hopefully it's not just before a show. Hopefully you've spent enough time with someone, although we have had one or two, where you kind of stop things and as a gallerist, you work with real tenderness to sort of affect, but not in a manner that's prescriptive. It's not, I think Lena would agree, it's not our roles to prescribe to artists what they should do. But it is our responsibility as their representation to say, please do not do that. That is not the best representation of your work. And sometimes we do have to take artists aside and say, you're better than this. This is just not good enough. What's going on? Not, it's not good enough, it's not selling. It's like, just, you can do this, you can do that. This is just not getting, so it's about a really intense, thorough understanding of the animal that is the artist. And if we do our jobs right and we work with people, tentatively to begin with, and things start to manifest, then you know it's the right home for the person. They feel it's the right home. The collectors start to invest in the work. But it's not a straightforward industry. It's not a straightforward practice. If it was, then everybody here wouldn't be here. You'd all be showing, you know what I mean? Like, it's hard work and it's unpredictable, and success is a relative term. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think I would also argue that even as a commercial gallery, you selling works should be the result of you putting up amazing shows and having incredible relationships with your artists. And that would result in the commercialization. But if you start thinking about, we need to sell 10 paintings today, Susie, it becomes a different kind of a conversation, So I think that it's really about getting those fundamentals in place that will result in the commercial success of your artist.
Yeah, I mean, look, it sounds quite romantic and sexy, but actually sometimes it is like, we have a bottom line at the gallery, We all know what we need to do in order to keep the lights on each month, so you have to sell. Yeah. We're not hard sellers. We don't force people into selling. We like to think that we have a relationship with our collector base that is much more organic than that, but we do have to sell. The artists have expectations, they have costs, especially during COVID. That was a very interesting time for us, because the moment that everything locked down, I remember, all the spaces shut down, and I remember it was like a kraal that all the galleries just got together in one hub, and we literally had an online meeting in end of 2019 and said, what do we need to do to keep the lights on and keep everybody okay? What do we do now? And we decided to do 3 successive online shows immediately. And then we gave a donation to, what was that? Solidarity Fund. But literally we shifted from curatorial, conceptual, what an interesting exhibition program, to how much money do we need to make for each artist so that they can feed their families, pay their school fees, and, So there is a bottom line here, and you do have to, it's gallerists, it's very tough because there's pressure, especially for the younger galleries, in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
I do also think that part of the nature of the beast is that as an artist, you quite often can't see your own work. You are blind to it. So whether you are working then with other artists or with your gallery, I think feedback is incredibly important, because other people can give you perspective on something that is in a blind spot for you. So it's not just about us saying you need to do this in order for the work to sell. It's about helping you as an artist to make the best work that you can.
And then there will be an audience for it in some capacity. But we have had horror stories occasionally. We have had artists who've, gone through terrible depressive episodes, or had terrible circumstances happen to them. And then it's a very gentle recovery. It's a very, gentle support. Sometimes artists have episodes where they can't produce any work. And then, you have a capacity as a gallerist, but also as a human being, you feel for people. So, yeah. But then they all come out of it and everyone's okay. Any other questions?
yeah, are we going to do discussion still? Because I'm wondering if we should have a quick break and then come back.
Yeah, sure. We can. Everyone can think about more questions, and then we'll have a break.